He was trying to explain to his wife that he lost all their money in a casino. She was screaming and said she wants a divorce. How have you seen a person's life be ruined in a single day? I was working in a bank. One day the director fired one of his executives. The whole "empty your desk, you're fired" speech in front of everyone. The director was furious and the guy seemed entirely destroyed. Then he explains to all that this guy gave his login and password to a friend in another branch. The friend used that login, and others, while doing some kind of credit card fraud. Police arrested her, but lacked evidence against the fired guy. So they just fired him on the spot. Obviously, besides losing his job, he was also blacklisted to work in banks or finance. I play poker. I once saw a man on my way in betting about 10K all on one roulette spin. He chose red, and lost. He looked defeated. Later that night, a guy at our table told us that he heard the guy on the phone crying in the parking lot trying to explain to his wife that he lost their money. She was screaming and said she wants a divorce. An 18-year-old tried to steal a couple bottles of Hennessy from my store. When I confronted him, he swung the bottle at my head and connected. I saw the hit coming and rolled with the blow. Literally. Definitely had a terrible headache, but the bottle didn't shatter. He was charged with robbery by my company. Violent crimes offender and lost custody of his baby. When I was in EMT school, we were told about a paramedic student. Instructor was a paramedic as well, who observed a stabbing call. They arrive at the bar and see a dude with a knife in his abdomen. Medic student takes lead and pulls the knife out, something you never do, as I'm sure you know. Senior medic loses his mind at this idiot, asking him what he was thinking. Student freaks out and, you guessed it, puts the knife back in. The patient died as a result. Student lost any chance of having a good job, not even just in EMS, and was charged with the death of the patient. Might have been manslaughter, I don't remember. His entire life was ruined because he freaked out and made a mistake on a call. Not a rookie mistake or a common slip-up, but in about half a minute he ruined his life. One of my coworkers arriving at work sobbing hysterically. It took a while to calm her down to the point where we could understand anything she was saying. I thought she must have been robbed or something, but it turned out she just found love letters in her car, from her mother to her husband. All I could think was that if that were me, the last thing I'd do is show up to work and tell everybody. How do you ever recover from that? I mean, if my husband was just having an affair with a chick or another man, I'd just divorce him. But my mother? They were having an affair. It wasn't just that the mom was infatuated and writing to him. Poor girl. She was such a nice person and did not deserve that. Watched a mom and her kid on a boat escorted by law enforcement back to the dock. Her boyfriend had gone swimming off the boat. The wind pushed the vessel away from him. She didn't know anything about how to turn it on to move it closer. It kept getting farther, he kept swimming harder. He eventually slipped under, and was recovered 80 feet down a few days later. I'll never forget the look on her face. Never. He was a 28-year-old airman. Peak health. Wear a life jacket, people. You are not stronger than Mother Nature. And don't leave a boat without someone who can drive it, safely. I've seen a colleague deal with a divorce. His wife cheated, the child wasn't his, and she copped to it at 9 months pregnant. Essentially, his ex-wife got the house, moved one of her several affair partners into the house, then pursued litigation for every penny she could get. Because his ex-wife aspired to be a homemaker who did not work, she was eligible for a respectable alimony. And he was responsible for child support. A national news story. A van full of college students got into an accident and most of them died, but one girl survived with major injuries. She had facial trauma and was hospitalized for weeks. She kept repeating another girl's name as she was recovering. Turns out, she was saying her own name. She and another similarly built, same hair and eye-colored female passenger were mistakenly identified for each other in the aftermath of the crash. Her family had a funeral for her, and the other girl's family were the ones at her bedside before the misidentification was realized. I cannot even imagine the suffering of thinking your daughter was alive for weeks and then learning she'd been dead all along, or having a funeral for a child who was actually alive and you didn't know. My elderly father unwittingly married a woman who would treat him bad for 4.5 years before we found out. We met her on the day of the wedding. That day sealed his fate. She isolated him from us, coerced him to sell his assets, stripped his bank accounts, heavily drugged him, etc. But we rescued him and he lived with us until he died. A girl I was once good friends with regularly transported 5 to 10 lawn bags full of herb in the back of her SUV for her boyfriend. I didn't really believe her when she told me until one day when I went over. She said, "Don't freak out about the smell, we just had our drivers arrive." When I got into her apartment, it smelled like Cheech and Chong had been living there for 50 years. Opened the door to the spare bedroom and the entire 10 by 15 room had at least 2 to 3 full bags stacked one on top of the other lining the perimeter. She got busted in a drug raid and was caught later. 7 years ago, a bunch of the crew chiefs at my guard base were out celebrating one of their own who got his associate's degree. They were all drinking, not a ton, and eventually went home. Except for one guy. He stayed and drank until last call. He decided to drive home. He hit a 20-year-old who was on his way to work at about 2 a.m., and turned him into a paraplegic. Our wing commander basically told him, "Plead guilty to the county and go to jail with an administrative discharge." His family would have been able to keep some of his benefits, like the VA loan and GI Bill. Or fight it, lose, cost his family tons of money, and get a dishonorable. Dishonorable basically is like you never even served. He plead guilty. As a marriage counselor, I often see one confession from a partner absolutely ruin their partner's life, future and self-esteem. It's heartbreaking. Client found out his wife was having an affair when he saw a text come in on her phone. That life is completely gone now. No more wonderful house. No more good, dual income. No more town he loved. He's pulling it together slowly, but it sucks a lot. One guy I knew found out that he was going to be a father on his graduation night. He was 17, and he looked absolutely destroyed. Someone replied, "The economic realities of being a teen parent are hellish, and I don't think people really realize how hard it is to provide for a kid when you're still a kid yourself. My sons are 5 and 4, I'm 24 now, and we're still dirt poor. It's going to take a long time for our family to recover economically from the way the boys have limited my and their dad's earning potential." One of my friends was playing online with me when I hear a knock on his door through the mic. His parents walk in and decide to tell them that he is adopted and that they are getting a divorce. All in one go. No emotional breaks or anything, and my friend just breaks down over the mic as his parents walk out. At least several times a month we had to take care of a family who learned that their child had cancer that day. Pretty terrible, life-altering news. I spent a lot of time distracting kids with board games or coloring, while their parents were talking to doctors, crying, and then amazingly pulling it together to continue on. My coworker got caught stealing and got fired. He went home and told his wife, and apparently she had enough and left him and took the kids. When I say steal, I mean close to $100,000 in precious metals from a cushy federal government job. He was going to be arrested and knew it. Police found him the next morning in the woods. I saw a man's life just crumble in less than 24 hours. I had a former colleague who was doing his residency in general surgery. He had just started his 5th and final year of training. One day, in the middle of a surgical case, the police show up at the hospital for him. A tech pulled him out of the OR, and he was arrested right there on the spot in front of everybody, still in most of his surgical attire. He had to do the walk of shame through the entire hospital, in handcuffs and or scrubs. Turns out his ex-wife had gone to the police claiming that he had done things to their children. The children testified to this effect as well. All of us were blown away. This was the sweetest, most cheerful guy ever. Nobody thought him capable of something like this. Sure enough, it came out several months later that the kid's statements were coerced and that his ex-wife falsified the whole thing. It wasn't the first time she had attempted to screw him over, but it was definitely the most successful. Dude's career and life were messed up. When I was a kid, I lived in an apartment complex. One of the families had 3 young kids. One day the parents needed to run some errands, so they hired a babysitter to watch the kids. The babysitter fell asleep, and one of the kids started playing with some matches. The parents came home to huge billowing clouds of smoke and fire coming from all the windows. They were only gone for about an hour. I used to work in a casino just after high school. It was in a suburb of a larger city, but basically the first one you can get to when coming in from the north of the province. A lady was crying at one of the slot machines. Apparently she was on her way into the city to go to the big mall and get Christmas gifts for her kids and family, but lost all the money before she got to the mall. She lost a bit at first, then the rest trying to get the first bit back. I have an uncle who one day found his wife cheating on him with his best friend, only to be accused of mistreating his daughters. And since the mother forced the girls to choose, they had to go along with the mom and lied on court he did the next week. He lost his best friend, his job at a high role in the military, lost his house and car during the divorce, gotten so much hate from his kids. He did not have a fun month or so until his daughter broke under the pressure and admitted lying. After that, the entire family, except the mom who won pretty much everything he owned, fell apart. Mom kicked out her child for betraying her. Kids left the house one after another, each to a different family member. Mom continued sleeping with other guys and made her own kids and her ex-husband's life into hell. A couple years ago around Christmas, I was staying with my cousins. We were up late watching movies when we hear a loud crash outside. We run out to see a truck on its side. I call 911 and head towards the truck. The neighbors were also making their way outside, and we go to help out the driver. We get him out, he reeks of alcohol, and starts asking if he can use my phone to call his wife. I let him use it and then tell him to go sit on the curb while the police gets here. He's Hispanic, and so am I, so we're talking in Spanish this whole time. He tells me to do him a solid and let him go, that his wife's on his way to pick him up. The cops arrive and I told them everything that happened. He had tried to walk away, but the other neighbors stopped him. Cops grabbed him and took him away. 20 minutes later, his wife calls my phone back asking for her husband, and I had to explain to her that her husband was drunk driving, crashed their brand new truck, and was currently in the back of a police vehicle. I felt horrible telling her all this, and still think about that conversation every once in a while. Riding a crowded elevator. A casually dressed computer science type of person is chatting with his bud on their way up, lunch in hand. He's complaining about some outside analyst coming to mess up their afternoon with petty BS. Just absolutely letting it all out on the short ride up to their floor. Ding, the two men exit, still griping and moaning about how much they hate nosy outsiders meddling in their work. Suddenly, there's a quick shuffle behind us, as a very well-dressed tall fellow in shoes worth more than my monthly take bounds in a long proud stride off the elevator. As the doors close, we watch in horror as he raises his hand towards the two employees. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Mind holding the door? So I can mess up your afternoon?" Slam, we never saw those guys again. I used to work in the FTC help call center. So we took calls from people reporting that they had been scammed. All day, 60 calls a day of people who had been scammed. I have heard it all. One of the worst was when a guy called and was telling me that he had been sending his mortgage for his farm, which was like a 2K/month mortgage, via Western Union to Nigeria, because he got a phone call a year ago from someone saying he was with the mortgage company and to send the payment that way from now on. He was telling me that he was now going to lose the farm and his wife was leaving him for it. He was in bad shape. Stuff like that really does happen. And other cases of other people calling to report that their parents have sent over $1 million to Nigeria via Western Union. That job was eye-opening in a bad way. Really boosted my cynicism. One of the former anesthesiology residents in the program in my hospital was in his last, CA3, year. He was emergency call, which comes after C1, C2 and C3 and basically never ever calls in. But you have to be available in the event that you do get called in. Most people will sleep with their phone on or go out to the movies or do basically anything within a 30 minutes drive of the hospital. Some crazy car accident happens that night around 2 a.m. and multiple trauma cases are going back into the OR. Our dude fell asleep and his iPhone did some automatic update, so he didn't get the call from the hospital immediately. His pager battery also died sometime that evening. He doesn't realize any of this until he's getting ready for work the next day at around 5:45 a.m. and sees his phone blown up. Shows up to work at 6, fired on the spot. Guy was 2 months away from graduation and starting $400,000 a year plus overtime job. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for free money from Nigeria. Click the right box for the Life Advice playlist. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories.